Hello and welcome to the next video in the series. In the previous video we imported our FBX animations. We then imported our WAV files for the audio, and then lastly we retargeted our animations to our two types of characters, either the metahuman ones or the more generic skeleton plus mesh characters. In this video we will start creating a sequence and use both one of the metahuman characters and one of the other more generic characters. So first, let's start by creating a sequence asset. You can find that in the cinematics and then level sequence, or you can just hover your mouse up here and write sequence to search. Here we find level sequence, and I will name it tutorial for this tutorial, and I will open it. Now you see the sequencer UI, and as you can see my mouse is disappearing on some boxes here, which is a bug in Unreal Engine 5.2 and also shows up in the later versions. If you don't have that problem, that's great, but if you do, to fix this issue you need to go to your settings and find in accessibility, go interaction, mouse, and here go to mouse pointer. Here in the mouse pointer style we will select custom, and then you can choose a color, and I just made it white, so I have my white color here. And then when I go back to Unreal Engine, we can now see our cursor in all boxes. There is another issue with the sequencer that is not always showing up, but it is one that shows up often, is by adding a track. Sometimes the properties do not show up, so you're required to save it, close the sequencer, and then reopen it again, and that should fix the issue. Okay, so let's first begin by adding a camera. You go up here and create a new camera and set it as the current camera cut. This gives you camera cuts and also a camera actor that has some properties. For example, it's currently spawned, and it also has aperture, focal length, and its transform, location, rotation, and scale. For the camera cuts, you see that there is a thumbnail. In some instances this thumbnail can be very heavy, so I suggest to right click on the thumbnail and then go to thumbnails and remove draw thumbnails. This should make the load of the sequencer much less and allow you to work much easier, especially if you have a computer that has a bit older hardware. Now that we have our camera, there are a lot of things that we can do here. The first thing is, for example, how to move the camera. One way to move the camera initially is to lock our viewport to the camera, lock the camera to the viewport, and here using right click we can now move our camera in any direction. With right click WASD or Q and E you can go up and down. If the camera moves too fast, you can use, while holding right click, you can use the scroll wheel to reduce the speed or increase the speed. Let's position the camera somewhere like this, and then we can, for example, change the focal length if the camera looks too close. Great. So now, in order to make the camera animated and move around or change the focal length on the go, we need to add a keyframe. Let's add a keyframe for the transform, and we can then move some frames down the line. And here we have two options. We can either move the camera by using right click and then animating this keyframe by pressing the plus, or we can expand the location, rotation or scale, what we want, and change the number by using left click and moving your mouse left and right, or just writing a number. In my case, I will use right click and position the camera somewhere and then keyframe it. As you saw, the moment you change the number, it automatically adds a keyframe. This is for convenience. And now we have a very basic animation of our camera. Let's change our focal length here. I will create a keyframe for that, and when we are rotating, I will change the focal length to be bigger, and now we have both of these actions working at the same time. Now I will show you how to use a second camera. Here we can, on the Cine Camera Actor, the Cine Camera Cut, we right click on the track, we go to Edit, and we select Split Selection. As you can see, it created a gap here between the two things. And now we need to add a new camera. To add a new camera, we can just press Create New Camera and apply it. We have our Cine Camera Actor 2. To change the camera cut, which one it uses, here it says Cine Camera Actor, so both of these use the first camera that we have set up. To use the second camera, go to the split that you want, right click, and in Properties, Camera Binding ID, we can select our second camera, and we can see that we have two cameras now. To check that the camera actually works correctly and the change applies, we can lock our viewport to the camera shift, to the camera cuts, and as you can see, the camera switches because of the focal length. Now we can also animate this camera in any way we want, and it will play until the end of the current track. You can expand it or shrink it as much as you want, and you can add more cameras and so on. Now I will add a fade track. This track allows me to essentially do a fade effect. So instead of having this noticeable jump between the cameras, we can add a 0 here. We can keyframe this. A couple of frames later, we keyframe to 1, which is the maximum value, 100% fade. We then go a little bit after our second camera starts, and we can again keyframe 1, and a couple of frames later we keyframe 0. And now you can see that we have a very basic fade effect that can cover up jumps between cameras. Next, I will add a visibility track, level visibility track from the plus. The level visibility track originally comes with only one track, which is visibility, but here we can add a hidden track as well. In the visibility track, for now we don't need to, we can add the level that we want, but in the hidden track we need to add the level that we don't want. So we are currently in the main level, that's called main. And here in the hidden, we go to properties and level names, level visibility. We add an entry and we write main. So now this level is hidden. Okay, so now we want to add another map, another level. So we go to our content browser, content, and here we can go to maps. And you have any level that says level here can be used for this. For example, let's go with the medieval dungeon, maps, and use demonstration. In other cases, the maps have, there are several maps given as an example. Here, for example, we can use Polar Facility Daytime or Polar Facility Sunset. To make things a bit easier, go to map and then copy the name, go back to your sequencer, and on the visibility track properties, add the entry and just paste the name and press enter. And there we go. Now we have our map being loaded. Okay, so now I will make it so we load another map during our cut here, our fade. To do this, I need to split the visibility and also the hidden tracks. As you can see, the properties are duplicated. Since we already have our demonstration track loaded, in the hidden we need to unload demonstration, which means that we add another element here to the array and we write demonstration, which will remove the map from being loaded. And in the visibility track we can choose any other map that we want. In this case I will go with the polar map and go with daytime. So polar facility example map daytime, copy the full name, and in the visibility, instead of adding a new entry here, we will just use the same entry and paste the name on top and press enter. So now if we move the bar, we will see that the maps are changing. There we go. It seems that the camera is inside the wall, but you can modify the position and transform of the camera to position it in the correct place that you want. So this is the basic way how to add fade and load the map that you want to load. Next, I will show you how to add characters. First, let's hide these. To add a character, we go to our content and we can either go to MetaHumans or the characters folder. Let's start with the MetaHuman one. I will go back to the beginning of the sequence and position Cine Camera 1 in a bit more proper place. Change the location like this. And to change the rotation, it's easier to lock the camera, the viewport to this specific camera, and then apply your changes. Now, these all do get keyframed, but just to make sure that everything is correct, I will keyframe the entire thing again. But the issue now is that because of our previous keyframes, the camera will move. So I will select all of these keyframes with Shift and left click, and then just press delete. And now my camera is static with a static focal length. But because we want the camera to be a little bit more dynamic, we can add a little bit of movement or the focal length to change a bit to make it a little bit better. Something like this, for example. Great. So now to add the MetaHumans, we can choose any of these. They have a blueprint in their folder, which you click and drag and add into the sequencer. In this case, it seems like I'm getting lucky because all of my tracks are added. But if you do not see these tracks in this window. Again, you need to save it, close it, and just open your sequence again. Now that we have our character added to the scene, first we can remove some of the things that it added automatically, which is the MetaHuman control rig, the control board control rig for the face, and the face track itself, and just select those and delete them. And for the body, we select plus track, find animation, and here we find our animations that we have retargeted earlier in the previous video. Let's go with the first one, and our character is already animated. We can position our character in any direction and orientation here. This will not create any keyframes because we don't have any keyframes right now. This will spawn the character where we have placed it. Here we go, the character is now looking towards the camera, and it will always be loaded here. Next, let's add another character from the more generic ones. Let's go with Munchkin here. And in this case, instead of using the blueprint, we will use the skeletal mesh because these characters are more generic. We add it to our sequence, and here in the animation track, we just press plus animation and find our retargeted animation from the previous video. And here we have Munchkin also being animated. Let's also position her towards the camera. I will now lock my camera and see how this looks. Right, so here we have our two characters animated, the camera is animated, and we are able to change our level. This is the most basic tutorial for the sequence, but I will show you one more thing. To make our sequence a little bit bigger, we can press Ctrl and then use the scroll wheel to expand the number of frames. We can also use Shift with the scroll wheel to move left and right. I will now move the red line that is the limit of how many frames we want for our sequence. And here, now that we have our animations, let me expand the camera as well. And because the camera is not in a good place, I will change it. Because this fade is now blocking me from seeing where I want my camera to start, we can remove this fade track by going to Edit Selection and then make it inactive. But because our last fade was black, it just stays the same way. So make sure before you do this to have your fade removed. So let's do this. Great, now we have our fade removed. You can move one frame another by using left and right arrow keys. I will now lock myself to the camera again. To move the camera a bit easier, I just hold right click and use WASD. Here we go, I'll position the camera like this. And I will also change its focal length to see a little bit more. And then I will return the fade track. Here we go. Perfect. because our visibility track here ends, it loads our default main, so we need to expand our visibility tracks as well. You can select both of them with shift, left click, and then drag to whichever frame you want. Here the animation ends. I'll zoom in with control and scroll wheel. The animation ends for our characters. I can add another animation. So this is our MetaHuman one. We find the next animation that we want. And in this case, the animation was not added to my track, but we can see that it is animated. So because it is not added to my track, I need to save the sequence, close it, and reopen it. Here it is. It added a new track. Because it added a new track, the bug appeared. If it added it in the same track, then we will not have that issue. And here it is animated. As you can see, there is a very noticeable jump between one animation and the other. To fix this issue, we see an arrow here on the top of these tracks. To make this a bit easier, you can zoom in and you can see a function here when you hover on the arrow. So now click the arrow and drag the arrow back several frames, and do the same on the other side. Now there is still a jump, but to fix this we just need to overlap the two animations, and here we are. Now we have a smooth transition from one to the other. Because these animations are conversation animations and they're not like an idle animation, it is best to add an animation here that is idle for the character. So let's do that. We need to add another animation here, and we press plus animation and add and we need to add an idle track. There is an idle track already here. Let's see if it will allow me to use it. No, it does not. Okay, this is fine. We can just right click on this, retarget the animation, and choose MetaHuman, add the suffix, and then retarget our animation to our folder. Here we go, we have our new animation. I'm going to save it. And now we can go back to our sequence and search for idle. Here we go, now we have it. Again, it added it in a new track and the bug appeared, so now I'll need to save it and close it again and open my sequence. Here is my idle animation. Let's see at which point this idle animation looks good. For example here, so now I can reduce the size of this animation. And for example, this seems like a good length. So I will edit and trim selection Okay, let's save it again, because it should have trimmed it, but it did not. And here it is, now it is trimmed. So let's put it back to our animation, our original animation track. And now we have a idle animation that can transition between our two conversational animations. Okay, great. Now we can add our audio tracks. So let's go to audio and just select audio track. Here we can select audio and find our track that we want. First, make sure that you're in the correct frame that you want to add it to make things a little bit easier for yourself. And now it should have added it. However, because of the bug, we need to save it, close it, and open it again. And there we have our track.
It was so awkward, my tried code of doom.
We have then this idle part where there is no audio. And here we can add our next audio track. Again, we added the track, however, because of the bug, it doesn't show up, so we need to save it, close it, and open it again. And here we have our audio. With the audio, you have several options. You can, of course, keyframe, pitch, and volume. And you can also bind them to a specific character, so they play only when this character is available. So, for example, if you decide that you want this character to spawn at a later time, you can do that, and it will not, the audio will not play. And this is the basic setup for the sequencer. You can play around, test things out, add more animations, and you can also check the animations and sequences from the previous years and the previous teams. Here they have their animations, their sequences, and you can open these up and look through the sequence. Thank you for watching.